can you now share time in your life when there was a significant change going on? It may have impacted you positively or negatively, but how did you cope with it? And what tools did you draw on to get through it successfully?
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to the very first time, as I mentioned earlier, that I was asked to run a project. It was a time when I was still at the Prudential. I was in what we'd now know as a PMO type environment, which we were just setting up. Based in Reading, all the IT development was in London. All the users were in Reading, and the tradition was that the IT guys in London built something, it came hurtling down the M4 to Reading, and everyone was expected to use it and it would work. This was literally my first taste of that kind of world at all. And anyone who knows me knows that technology is not my thing. So I thought, oh my goodness. And the guy who asked me to do this, and I said, well, I've never done a project. I don't know the first thing about IT. He said, no, I want you to do it because I want you to ask the obvious questions, and I want you just to be you and go and see what you can do. So, and that's what I did. And that is why I choose this example, because it was fundamental to my whole learning and my whole philosophy for the rest of my change world, really. Those days we used PMW as a project plan, and everybody thought the project was a PMW piece of paper, and everyone was looking at their PMW plans. But to me, they were unrealistic. They were never going to work. So first thing I did was just struck up the relationship with the guys who were working on it and got some users involved, created a team, which I couldn't believe was quite revolutionary. And that, I thought, well, surely that's the obvious thing to do. Got users talking to the guys who were building it, worked out with them. It's all the stuff that we do, stakeholders. What I found is all the stuff that I did then and we did then has now been labelled into something and turned into processes. And the danger is, I think, we can overly complicate things like that and become caught up with the process and the label and the technique as opposed to just doing it. And really got them to think seriously about estimating and to get a realistic plan rather than be driven by, it's got to be done by that timescales, because the stress was immense. And what it also took was some serious challenging of some of the senior people there because partly their reputation was hanging on, it was a major multi-million IT development at the start of changing a whole customer service that we now know and love. And again, it just went down to basic stuff, talking to people, explaining the benefits as to why it's better to have realistic estimations and why other things needed to be involved, because the cost of not doing so, which is where my quality bit kicked in, is far more than getting it right the first time. And that project ran for over 2 years, and then it was delivered, and it was successful. There were things that were cut out, there were compromises, there always are. All those faithfuls, time, cost, quality, what's the most important at the time. So there were changes, and I think that's the other thing that I would share in terms of my learning. A plan is an intent at a certain period in time, but things do change along the way, and it's important to acknowledge that change and manage it and deal with it, rather than just stick, nose to the grindstone and then wonder why, there's dissatisfaction at the end.
It's interesting, isn't it, how the leadership of change quite often just comes down to the relationships that you have.
Yeah.
And, are you able to open up conversations and allow people to express their concerns? Because as you say, there's a lot of projects that I've joined where if you go out for lunch or something, or you're having a coffee with somebody, they'll quite happily tell you what the problems are. But as soon as you say, right, we're now going to capture some of those and feed it back in a report, it's like, oh, don't attribute that to me.
Yeah,
And it's almost as if we can't share when we have concerns about a project because the bosses have said it's got to be done by such and such a date. And very rarely, I mean, the interesting thing is, isn't it? If you say to somebody who manages people, when you ask, let's say, when you ask Simon to do that, are you 100% sure of exactly how it needs to be done? Most bosses will say no.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping Simon's going to work it out, actually.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I found. If you can help project teams recognize that their job is to do the analysis of the plans and decide, is this doable?
Yeah.
Can we do it in the way it's been imagined, in the time frame, or does our expertise tell us something different? Because if it does, we've got to communicate that back, and people then need to say, okay, are we going to phase this project? Is it going to be done in a different time frame? But without that expertise being communicated well, then we end up in situations where, as you say, everybody's just getting super
yeah.
and it doesn't really work.